The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had seen its share of storms, wars declared, empires broken, entire species petitioning for survival, but never this. The chamber, an ocean of light and hovering sigils, sat unnaturally silent. Rows of representatives from 400 starfaring civilizations stared at the central podium, where the human delegation stood motionless. No shuffling of papers, no translators whispering, just a suffocating stillness that made the air feel heavier than the gravity regulators allowed. Ambassador Kethron of the HFY Collective, tall, insectoid, armored in shimmering plates, clicked his mandibles nervously. They should have folded by now, he thought. Humans always posture, but they know their place. But the humans were not posturing. Admiral Serena Kale, Earth's senior envoy, stood in front of the council with a calmness that chilled everyone present. She didn't shout. She didn't bargain. She merely placed a small obsidian case on the table, pressed her thumb against the seal, and let the hologram unfold. The chamber darkened. Above the table appeared a series of tactical maps, first one star system, then 3, then 12, each displaying glowing red icons of orbital stations, fleets, and garrisoned worlds. One by one, the icons blinked and vanished in coordinated bursts, each accompanied by the ghostly echo of detonation markers. Every eye in the chamber turned to the human admiral. "This is not a simulation," she said, her voice low and steady, carrying through the hall without amplification. "These were your fleets. These were your forward operating bases. And as of 4 hours ago, they no longer exist." Murmurs erupted like a tidal wave. Several species recoiled, their frills and feathers bristling in instinctive fear. A delegate from the Zivar Union collapsed in his chair, gills spasming. Ambassador Kethron slammed a claw against the table, voice rising in disbelief. "Bluff. You expect us to believe that a Tier 2 backwater world could dismantle 3 joint fleets in under a day?" Kale didn't blink. She merely tapped the case again, and the projection shifted, now showing real-time surveillance feeds. Wreckage of HFY's capital ships drifting in orbit around the disputed colony of Torath, 6. Fires raging on garrison moons. Human warships, sleek and angular, moving like predators through the void. "This council demanded that Earth submit," Kale said. "You gave us ultimatums. You seized our colonies. You told us we would either kneel or burn." She looked at each delegation, her gaze as sharp as a blade. "Well," she said, "we chose neither." The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. It wasn't just fear, it was the dawning realization that the humans hadn't come here to bargain at all. That night, panic spread like wildfire through the station. Diplomats whispered in secluded corridors, sending frantic encrypted transmissions back to their homeworlds. Fleets were recalled, defensive grids were armed, and entire sectors went on alert. But the humans didn't leave. They remained in their embassy suite, their single warship anchored at the edge of the station's defensive perimeter like a patient predator. They sent no more communiques. They made no threats. And that silence was worse than war drums. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council didn't feel like the seat of power. It felt like prey. Admiral Kale stood alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars through the reinforced viewport. She knew this was only the beginning. The Council would retaliate, they always did. But Earth had crossed the point of no return, and she had just made sure the entire galaxy knew it. She whispered to herself, almost too quiet to hear. "Let them come." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session at dawn station time. The Grand Hall was no longer dignified, it was chaos. Voices overlapped in dozens of languages, some pitched in panic, others in fury. The holographic displays were alive with feeds of destroyed fleets and burning colonies. Security drones buzzed overhead, trying to enforce order. At the center podium, Council Speaker Voreth slammed the ceremonial staff of Unity against the floor, its thunderclap echoing through the hall. "Silence. Reluctantly, the hall quieted. "The matter before us is clear," Voreth growled, his scaled head glistening under the chamber lights. "Humanity has executed a coordinated strike against member fleets, violating every treaty of the Core Accord. They must be brought to heel before this contagion of rebellion spreads." 1,000 voices erupted again, but this time with more purpose. Some cried for vengeance, others demanded caution. The debate fractured along predictable lines. Species with border colonies screamed for immediate military action, while core world empires hesitated, wary of the unknown. Ambassador Kethron of the THRYX took the floor first, his plates still dulled from shock but his tone sharpened to a cutting edge. "We cannot allow a Tier 2 species to humiliate the Council without reprisal," he hissed. "Our fleets may have been caught unprepared, but we have numbers. We will crush their fleets, strip their worlds, and scatter their survivors to the void. If we hesitate, every minor world will think they can defy us." A roar of approval followed from the hawkish delegations. The Scar hierarchy delegates slammed a talon in agreement, the Jurati clicked their mandibles in bloodlust. But then a quiet voice spoke. "If we attack and fail," said High Chancellor Rin of the Valorians, her translucent skin shimmering with unease, "we will have declared war on a species capable of dismantling our fleets in hours. What we saw yesterday was not luck. It was preparation." She gestured toward the hologram replay of human warships moving in perfect formation, striking with surgical precision. "No species rises from Tier 2 to this level of coordination without help. Without something new." A ripple of fear passed through the chamber. The word she had avoided saying was on everyone's mind: superweapon. "What are you suggesting?" Kethron spat. "That we treat them as an existential threat," Rin replied. "Not as an unruly colony world. If they have weapons that can wipe out fleets before we even detect them, we must either negotiate from a position of respect, or mobilize every fleet we have and accept that this war could cost us trillions." A silence fell. Even the most warlike species hesitated at that number. And then, as if summoned by fate, the chamber doors hissed open. Admiral Serena Kale stepped inside. Gasps rippled across the room. It was unprecedented, no outsider had ever entered a council session uninvited. But Kale didn't flinch. She walked to the center dais, her boots ringing against the polished floor. "Continue," she said, her voice calm. "I wouldn't want to interrupt the vote." Security drones flitted nervously, but Voreth raised a claw to stop them. "Admiral Kale," he said slowly, "you are not authorized to." "You called this meeting to discuss war with my people," Kale interrupted. "You might as well allow us to listen. Or are you afraid of the truth?" The insult struck like a blade. A dozen delegates surged forward, shouting, but Kale simply raised her wrist and tapped a control. Another hologram appeared, this one not of destroyed fleets, but of human shipyards. Massive constructions, kilometers long, suspended in orbit over Mars and Titan. Unknown vessels, larger than any ship the Council had ever fielded, under assembly. "This is what we have built in secret while you debated how to contain us," Kale said. "You thought we were begging for a seat at your table. We were preparing for the day you tried to break us." She let the image hang in the air for a long moment before turning toward the speaker's dais. "If you vote for war," she said softly, "understand that we will not fight for survival. We will fight for finality. And when it ends, there will not be a council left to threaten anyone." The silence was suffocating. For the first time in living memory, the Galactic Council didn't look like a court of rulers, it looked like an animal caught in a predator's gaze. Hours later, the vote came. The chamber was hushed as the tallies appeared one by one: green for war, red for negotiation. Green. 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 Then red. Then red again. The final tally was split, but just enough tipped toward military action to authorize the mobilization of Council forces. The decision was made. War was coming. But even as the chamber erupted with the noise of preparing commands, Voreth could not shake the look in Admiral Kale's eyes. She hadn't looked like someone who feared the Council's fleets. She had looked like someone who was waiting for them. That night, as Council warships began to depart the station, human intelligence networks were already intercepting their orders. Admiral Kale stood aboard the HSS Vengeance, watching the mobilization through the viewport. She didn't smile. She only said 4 words, quiet but cold. Now we finish this. The Council fleets came in silence. Hundreds of warships, their hulls gleaming with the light of distant suns, jumped into soul space in perfect synchrony. Their formation stretched across the void like a wall of steel, blotting out the stars from every angle. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council had united under a single command. The operation was named Final Compliance. Its goal was simple: strike Earth, destroy its shipyards, and force humanity to kneel before the Council or perish. On the flagship KRYTH Dominion, Council Speaker Voreth stood at the forward observation deck. He should have felt victorious, commanding the largest fleet ever assembled, but something in the pit of his gut felt wrong. "We caught them off guard," said Kethron, standing beside him. "Their defenses are minimal. Their shipyards will fall within the hour." Voreth nodded but said nothing. Then, without warning, the void answered. At first it was just a ripple, barely detectable on sensors, but then space tore open, and the first human warship emerged. Not a small corvette. Not a frigate. A Titan. The HSS Vengeance dwarfed every ship in the fleet, its angular hull bristling with weaponry that no Council database could identify. Behind it came others, massive carriers, destroyers, and escort ships, an entire armada that had never been listed in any registry. The humans hadn't been bluffing. They hadn't even been posturing. They had been building. "All batteries, fire!" Kethron roared. The void lit up as Council weapons discharged in a synchronized barrage, beams and projectiles converging on the human flagship. The Vengeance didn't dodge. It didn't even raise its shields. Instead, its hull panels glowed red for a fraction of a second, and the entire wave of incoming fire vanished, collapsing into nothingness. No explosion. No flash. Just, gone. "Impossible," Voreth whispered. The Vengeance answered with a single shot. One lance of white fire cut across the void, slicing through a battlecruiser as if it were paper. Then another. Then another. Each blast found its mark with surgical precision, carving through Council ships faster than they could reposition. The Council fleet responded with desperation, splitting into attack wings, flanking maneuvers, and retreat vectors, but it didn't matter. Human ships moved like predators, striking and vanishing, reappearing behind enemy lines and gutting formation after formation. Inside the command center of the Vengeance, Admiral Kale stood perfectly still, issuing orders with icy calm. "Target the flagships first," she said. "Take their command net apart piece by piece." Her crew obeyed with grim efficiency. Every time a Council command vessel went dark, the fleet's coordination crumbled further, turning their once perfect formation into scattered chaos. By the time the first hour ended, 1/3 of the Council's ships were gone. By the second hour, half were burning or fleeing. Voreth clutched the railing, his claws digging into the metal. He had seen war before, had led purges and campaigns, but nothing like this. This wasn't battle. It was extermination. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the human guns fell silent. The remaining Council ships drifted helplessly, engines crippled, comms jammed. One by one, their captains received the same transmission. "This is Admiral Serena Kale of Earth Command. Your fleets are disarmed. Your surrender is accepted. Power down your reactors or we will finish what we started." The Council fleet had no choice. One by one, ships went dark. The void became still again, littered with debris and drifting wrecks. Hours later, the surviving delegates of the council gathered once more, this time not in the Grand Hall, but in a secured chamber aboard the Vengeance. Kale stood at the head of the table, flanked by armed guards. "You summoned us to negotiate terms," Voreth said bitterly. "No," Kale replied. "Negotiations are over. You came to enslave us. You tried to break us. This is not diplomacy. This is your sentencing." She activated the display. Holograms of shattered fleets and disabled stations filled the room. "Effective immediately," Kale said, "Earth withdraws from your council. Your claim over our colonies is void. And if you ever send fleets into our systems again," she paused, letting the words hang like a blade over the table, "you will not get the chance to surrender next time." The silence was absolute. Slowly, Voreth bowed his head. Not in respect, never that, but in the quiet acknowledgement that the age of council dominance had ended. When the session was over, Kale walked alone to the viewport of the Vengeance. The battlefield still glowed faintly with the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Earth had not just survived. It had ascended. Kale placed her hand against the glass, whispering to the stars as the engines thrummed beneath her feet. "It's our turn now." And for the first time in galactic history, the council didn't dare say otherwise.